The advantage of that approach is that everything becomes natural in your workflow, reporting, screens, everything it's there. You don't have to worry about it. Or you can build on the outside. If you build on the outside, then you link through the sort of messaging or the APIs. You can still use our authorization and authentication routines or services to make sure that you are a true user of the system.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our number one priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the WBS Podcast. I'm Sam Gupta, your host and principal consultant at the independent ERP and digital transformation consulting firm Elevate IQ. AI is changing the world. You have infusion of AI at every step in the process. Whether you talk about first mile or last mile, whether you talk about AI being used to intelligently and automatically capture paper-based invoices or to enrich, augment, and predict incomplete data. But you can't get results from AI if you have data silos. In fact, AI initiatives might fire back if you trained your models with the wrong data. In today's episode, our guest, Claus Jepsen, discusses why AI and ML solutions are less effective if businesses still have data silos. He also discusses Unit 4 stories and their unique approach to the cloud. Finally, he discusses issues with first and last mile of AI and how they each offer unique challenges. Let me introduce Claus to you. As Chief Technology Officer at Unit 4, Claus is building cloud-based super scalable solutions and bringing innovative technologies such as AI, chatbots, and predictive analytics to ERP. Claus is a strong believer that having access to vast amounts of data allows us to construct better, non-intrusive, and pervasive solutions to improve our experiences, relieve us from tedious chores, and allow us focus on what we as individuals really love doing. With that, let's get to the conversation. Hey Claus, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sam. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Of course, and it's always fun when we invite the industry experts. And today it's going to be a very interesting conversation in general because when you talk about artificial intelligence, everybody's talking about that, but they don't really understand that they need to have their data in order as well as the systems in order to get the results. So this is fascinating for me personally. Just to kick things off, if my audience may not know about you, do you want to start with your intro and your current focus?
Yeah, I can do that. So my name is Claus Jepsen. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Unit 4. I've been here for a number of years. I actually started as the Chief Architect looking at how we could build more self-driving ERP, which of course involves a lot of machine learning technologies under the AI umbrella. Unit 4 is a global leader in enterprise software for people-centric companies and organizations, and we mostly are in the mid-market area, focusing on PS organizations, public sector, not-for-profit, and higher education.
Yeah.
And we developed sort of the full range, and our recent, it's not that new anymore, is the ERPX, which is a fully cloud-based software solution within that space.
Okay, amazing. So we are going to drill a little bit more into the Unit 4 story as well. I guess I don't know how many people are really going to know about it because obviously Unit 4, the name, especially in the ERP community, in North America, I don't know how well known that is. I mean, the people who are going to be part of the ERP industry, they probably know. But you guys probably need to do a little bit more in terms of your marketing.
We are the hidden gem.
I know, right?
We're a European-based software company, but we do have presence in the US as well, of course. But we probably have to work on that.
Yeah, so we have one of these standard questions that we ask every single guest, and that is going to be your perspective on business growth, Klaus?
My perspective on business growth. So it depends on how you look at it. I think one of the key thing about growth can be, okay, how do I grow my company? Where does the economy go? I think one of the key things to bear in mind is that when you want to grow, if you want to grow your company, you have to grow within your market or you have to grow outside your market. But nearly regardless of what you do, I think a key concern for everyone is that you make sure that you understand your own internal processes, right? Because I think a lot of companies forget that sometimes they stumble due to limitations in the scalability that actually originate from internally more than external forces, right? Where they don't have sufficient control about the internal processes, the data they have, and so forth. And that's sort of into the discussion here, right? Because when you want to grow and where you want to go grow, you need the data to make data-driven decisions. That's my view, right? And then you need to have your internal capabilities, your processes, your data, and all that house in order, and actually to be capable of moving to a different region, if that's what you think about in terms of your company's growth, right? And efficiency is one of them. And I also believe that if you look at it, right, so we were sort of fearing a recession, we were fearing all kind of weird, and if you go out and read, you hear everything from it's going to be a disaster to we're going to be out of the woods in 2 weeks, right? So where does it sit? But if I look at it and listen to it, I think things are going to shape up pretty fast, returning to normal. And I think there's a great opportunity for companies to go out and grow their businesses in a world where you will see more investment into whatever aspects of the world you're operating in. But make sure you have your house in order, you understand your data, and you can drive your company and decision based on data.
Yeah, could not agree more. And I really like your bit about keeping your house in order. And that is probably going to tee up with the conversation today in terms of why you need to have your house in order to be able to get results, because everybody talks about artificial intelligence, but they don't sort of understand how to keep the house in order. Now, I am going to layer in one more commentary that you mentioned, and that is going to be around Unit 4, right? So if you look at the ERP market, and I am offering our commentary based on our understanding, and typically I like to be slightly more technical in nature as well. So you have been architect, CTO now. So obviously that's going to be a very interesting conversation. When we look at different ERP offerings, Unit 4, my understanding is that you guys are trying to position yourself as more of the packaged software in general. So you are going to get a lot more as part of the software. Now, if you disagree with that, if you are trying to position differently, then you can tell us, right? But when you look at the packaged software, obviously there are going to be many different components. And in any architecture, when you look at the enterprise architecture, obviously your AI is going to be there, your data warehouse is going to be there, but then you have to have everything else as well. If all of this is probably integrated, then your AI is going to be easier. Otherwise, it becomes very difficult. So I don't know. I mean, see, I offered a lot. So whatever you want to unpack in this one, whatever you want to agree, disagree, your turn.
No, but I think it's I think so. So one of the things there. So let me just before we go into the data topic, let me say the one thing that's changing, and I think this is important for everyone as well. If you're looking at listening to this, is that in general, what you should be very concerned about when you go and acquire a new ERP system is you should be concerned about the level of customizations you want to do beside regular configuration topics, right? Because what tends to happen if you go into a direction where you still envision that the ERP needs to be molded into your internal workings, you're going to have a challenge down the road, right? Because first of all, that drives up your implementation cost. Second, it makes it really hard for you to update. And thirdly, part of that process, you may actually cause, well, damage is a hard word to use about this, but you may cause your data model for your implementation to deviate from the standard. And why is that a bad thing? That's actually a really bad thing if you want to apply standard algorithm afterwards, like machine learning algorithms, because everything goes on data, right? So you have these different attributes. So if you start, or we call them features in that word, but if you start changing these things, like what data elements you have, how you specify a customer and so forth, then the standard offerings around automation won't work, and you have to go sort of retrofit that to your installation, right? So I think the key concern is make sure you use standard. Part of standard is also integrations. So as you said, Sam, ERP is one of many, right? There's a lot of different components out there in the world, but if you go and look at buying some software, and now it's a packaged software, that also comes with a set of standard integrations. And that means that the vendor typically then have taken into consideration that, well, in this system, a customer looks like this, or a sales order looks like that, or whatever it is, right? Or supplier looks like this if you have some supplier portal, communicating with your back office ERP. But if they then have the standard integration, that means that then they capture the correct data elements that then later goes into your data lake, data warehouse, whatever the taste is. I heard a new term the other day. I can't remember what it was, but it's sort of the next generation of this. Hyper data, something.
Yeah.
Anyway, there was something new coming up. I'm not really. Sometimes I sort of like, I'm not sure I understand quite what the difference between these three things is, but they sort of solve the same problem, right? But anyway, it goes in there, and the key thing about the data lakes, the data warehouses, this is where from you drive your machine learning. That's where you sort of inject it. So you have sort of this big data pool that to a certain degree is normalized, not like database normalized, like we know it from database technology, but normalized in terms of the semantics around the attributes and the objects, such that you can actually run learning on top of that data set. Make sense?
Yeah, it does. And this is such an interesting conversation. And I am going to offer my commentary based on what I have seen and some crazy challenges, okay, with respect to the overall architecture. So, for example, you mentioned that any of the systems, when they are designed, they are going to have certain assumptions with respect to their data model. They are also going to have assumptions in terms of how these systems are going to be integrating with the other systems in the market. For example, let's say you have ERP, you have CRM, you probably mentioned e-commerce. In your space, I guess you are going to have the strategic sourcing, indirect sourcing, all of that. So you need to probably integrate with all of that too. So each of these systems are designed with a particular data model in mind. Now, when you are going to be customizing, I think you had that layer as well. When you are going to customize, okay, customizing could mean that you are simply adding a field in the UI. Okay, no problem. But when you are going to be mixing the intent of data, for example, let's say you created a new table because you didn't like what Unit 4 offered or SAP offered. I don't care what ERP system that is. Okay, you added a table, and I have seen scenarios, and you are going to laugh at this one. Okay, storing customers or using customer field inside your ERP and storing dimensions inside that because the ERP natively did not support any sort of dimensions. Okay. So, in the ERP, there are no customers. In customers, you are storing this. Okay. So now
it happens all the time, Sam.
Right. So now your integrations are going to fail. And if you are going to get this data inside your data lake, your AI is going to be as smart as you are, to be honest. Okay. So it becomes extreme fun. So one of the things that you like to sort of, and that's why we started this conversation. I was so interested in this conversation that you have to have these building blocks in order, the comment that you had mentioned, to get any sort of decision science. Otherwise, none of it is going to work. Now, over to you. I don't know, whatever agreement.
But it's a very good one. I think the good thing about cloud-based ERP, like our ERPX, is that you cannot get to the data. You cannot get to the database. So at least we don't see this anymore. But I can tell you what you're telling is a very, very common things to do in an on-premise installation, because you have full access to the data, so you can sort of put everything in there. And this is actually downstream. It's going to ruin everything else you make, right? Because you're changing the semantics. So the systems downstream doesn't know what this means, right? And then everything just breaks left and right for you. This is also one of the key things to, and I'm going to make it a little, so I'm going to get back to talking. But this is also one of the reasons why we keep saying, you use the standard implementation, because if you do that, then whatever you have done yourself, it won't break it, right? Because if you start messing around with things at that level, when the vendor then tries to update you, everything breaks left and right, and you're left with this ending up on a very old version. So that's also why, so as part of this, as part of ensuring this segregation of concerns, if you want, in terms of what the software do as a core and what you add or enrich it with on the side, the systems that offers that complete separation such that, and make sure that you have a contract that doesn't break, then whatever you build on the outside using API, messaging, or whatever technologies that's in place can have their own roadmap, their own life cycle, whereas the vendor system like ours have their own, and it won't ever break, right? And downstream, the data stays the same. So when we deliver machine learning capabilities around our standard data set, that always works, right? Because you cannot alter it. You can, of course, decide to have integration that feeds additional data into the data lake.
Yeah.
And then you can build your own algorithms on top of that, taking that into consideration. That is perfectly fine. But you still need to be mindful around, and this is get your data, get your house in order, that the data set is solid, that you know what it means. Because as soon as you put something, that's like throwing a monkey wrench into the wheel. The whole thing is just going to blow up. And you get, I remember, I think it was like 8 years ago, when we started looking into all this stuff here, we ran sort of a project where we took, this was back in the day where everything was still on premise, and we tried to build a standard delivery around the resource allocation for projects to find sort of the best fit based on parameters. And the reason we had to give up on it at that time, now we got it, in X, was at that point in time, there was no customers who were the same. So they have different attributes, flexi field, custom field, attribute relations, or whatever we call them out here in sort of in ERP land. But there's just no way to build one algorithm that supported everything. Unless we told all the customers, we have to implement it this way. That was hard back then. It's getting way, way easier today because companies and people, decisions make understand going by standard, taking standard, goes faster, it takes you no time to implement. And by the way, I can tell you, your business processes are not the unique selling point for whatever your company is doing. Most business processes have the same level of approval steps. They pretty much have the same value matrix. Why do you bother? Just take what everybody else is doing, and you get flying in no time instead of sitting there trying to reinvent the wheel every time.
Yeah, exactly. And I could not agree more. And I like your comment about know what you mean. And obviously, the enterprise software vendors are going to have their own guidelines in terms of how you are supposed to be utilizing their software. It's almost like medicine, approved for a specific indication, and you are supposed to be consuming only for that. If you consume for something else, that's not my problem, okay? And sometimes we are going to see a lot of creative use cases. So here, one of the things that you mentioned, in the cloud world, the problem is not as severe. In the on-prem world, it was different because you had access to everything. You could do whatever you want. And there were a lot of problems because of that. But even in the cloud world, okay, if you look at and I don't know, as much about the approach that you are taking in the cloud for your ERP, but most of the bigger ones, at least, they expose their database layer to the business users as well, because they are helping them customize as much as they like. Because if they are not able to customize, they have to have some way of creating the tables. If they are not able to create those, then we have a real problem here, right? Because, there are always going to be custom processes, even if they feel it, or because they cannot re-engineer it, or whatever could be the reason, but they are always going to need the tables. And the amount of customization that I see in your space, not for profit, public sector, universities, they have very unique workflows in general. Okay, it's not like manufacturing. Manufacturing, you have, but not as much. So now, when you look at this one, I don't know whether you guys are offering the database access, but the problem is still there. So when I say database access, meaning they can they not create their tables? No? Interesting. So let's say if they have to customize, how are they supposed to customize?
But what do you mean by customize? You shouldn't customize. That's the first step, right? So I think it really depends on. I can talk what our customers. I cannot. And actually, we have a number. So the ERPX, which is a true multi-tenant cloud solution, we do not allow any access to the database. The database schema is sacred. Period. Right? We do have public customers running on it live. We have commercial customers on it live.
Yeah.
We have non-profit customer on it live.
Yeah.
So and they cannot change the database. So that can either mean that we have a kick-ass workflow engine that actually to a large extent allow you to mold it into what you want without having to change the database. I think one of the key things that makes our software, now I'm not trying to sound like a commercial here because that's not the point, but I think what you see is that the data structure, the fundamental data structure of the system in ERPX allows you to enrich the object at a very, very low level without having access to the database. It's standard functionality. So you can add new attributes to existing objects. You can extend existing objects with other objects. So you can sort of build a complete new representation, but you still, of course, have your standard definitions, right?
Yeah.
So that many other systems, they don't have that, which means that they only have everybody got flexi field or custom field, which is sort of an add-on, right? But you cannot make them first-class citizens in your system. So if you, for example, sitting with somebody else's system and you're saying, I need this attribute to be part of my workflow process, then that requires you to go and make a database schema change for this to happen, right? You can add a table, you can do some joins and whatever, and it pops up in the workflow. In our case, you don't have to do that. That's actually supported natively by the application, that you can enrich it. And these enrichments, these extra attributes, become first-class citizens in the system. So they become available as like something we defined ourselves in workflow and reporting, wherever, in everything, right? So that's actually a very unique technical concept of our architecture. I see you weren't aware of that, but I think that's I think people do it. So we have not had, for those customers, nobody have access to the database, and we solved that problem you're talking about by having this very flexible data structure. However, it doesn't mean that the sort of the high level taxonomy or the ontology for that object changed, right? Because the standard elements are still in their standard configured. When we roll out a piece of software, we have some standard setups. The attributes are defined, and we roll them out, and they are fixed. So those are what we can base our machine learning on. So we keep it stable. Remember when I just talked about this 8-year-old project? That was actually the problem we had. There was no way we could enforce some standard configuration because everything could change and people could mess around with the database. But by having it isolated, we then control it without removing all the flexibility from the custom. So that's actually how we did that. And nobody have access to the database. And I would think, if you're buying a SaaS solution or a cloud-based multi-tenant software, and they need you to go and mess with the data, I'm not sure what you bought.
So very interesting commentary there. So I'm going to hit on some of the things that you mentioned, the attributes, and obviously our listeners would benefit by understanding how your enrichments work and how they are going to be different from the other ERP systems. Most ERP systems, they all support attributes, and I don't know if your attributes are going to be different. Attributes are going to be at any of the business objects. You talk about items, customers, vendors, they are going to have attributes, right? I'll give you one story to give you a real example, how customers are sort of utilizing the customization and why customizations matter. Now, I don't know who's going to be right or wrong. You can tell me, Klaus, okay? But this is a real life scenario where, customers sort of understand that, okay, they are not going to be over customizing the ERP. But when you get into the real life situations, then things are going to be a little different. So here, in this particular case, the customer, they sort of understood that, they have to use out-of-the-box ERP processes. But then when they are trying to solve the problems, that's a different deal, right? Because this is my problem. I kind of understand the solution. Maybe I don't as much that I should. I'm not investing as much in consulting dollars. So what I am going to do is I am going to implement the way I understand. So in this particular case, what they did is, okay, ERP system, they had one warranty flow they didn't like, because from their perspective, the warranty workflow was extremely overbloated. Okay. So the kind of warranty that these guys had was very simplified. Obviously, the system wasn't as fit for the business. So they had to do all of these ad hoc arrangements. So now what they had to do is they had to create a new warranty workflow. Okay. They hijacked one screen from somewhere. They could do that, and they had to create a new table. Okay. So this is now, from the ERP perspective, it's probably a big no-no in general. I mean, I would not recommend, probably you would not recommend that. Why do you have to do this? Go back and learn your ERP. But then you have the real life situation where they solve this problem. So they would need the access to the database because the attributes are not going to be enough for them to be able to implement this scenario, because attributes are going to be flat. They don't necessarily have the hierarchy. For warranty, you need the hierarchy. You need warranty to be supported at the business object level, and that's why they have to customize. So real life situation, real life story.
Yeah. No, but I think that's a good use case, right? But I think so. For example, when I talk attribute, there's standard attributes with sort of the one you referenced, right? An item got an item number. There's a business key. There's some standard, but then you have then you of course have flexi fields you can add. Typically, right? You have a number of flexi fields you can add. Nobody really cares about them. We have when we talk about attribute relations, we talk about a different construct, right? So this really, so for example, like on a customer, you have a name or address. Then you can decide you want a new element in there that nobody knew about. For example, if a customer, if there could be a warranty, or but you can actually create it. The warranty just needs to come. It needs to come off something that exists in the system, right? So, for an example, warranty would be you're selling some product, right? And then you have a product master. Yeah. And then you would say, I need a warranty around this product, and then you build a warranty. So if we had an ERP like that, we would probably have a warranty object somewhere, right? And then you're saying, well, the attributes on this warranty object does not really fulfill what I want to do. Hence, I need to go create a new. But what we would do in that case is we say, well, you can add new elements to it. And you can then say, well, I need a different object that sits on a warranty object. That's fine. You can define a complete new object with new attributes on, and you can do that in the system. And then you of course have this. You get this sort of like warranty object tree if you want. The good thing is that all this that's get added, they're also available in the workflow. So when you build your workflows around it, you don't have to do any other weird work, because when you define the workflow, you can go in and say, well, my workflow needs to trigger based on this attribute value. And even if that attribute was added by the customer, then it will pop up as a first-class citizen like the standard attributes. That's the key difference, right? They will also be able to come on screens. They'll be able to come on reporting. That's the difference. That's one way to do it, right? And then you can use the same the workflow engine or the process engine in the system to actually handle all the steps you need to go through in approval or task or whatever you want to do with this warranty. So you can use all this. So that's one use case. I think that we would solve it that way.
Yeah.
Another way to do this is that we strongly believe in saying that ERP is essentially a standard set of functionality.
Yeah.
It can sound a little weird, but it's sort of moving into what databases, right? So it's sort of like, in general, it sits there, it's doing its work, it's churning away. You don't really want to deal with too much with it because going into it's complicated, right? But if you then want to build new, let's say you want to build a complete new application, my warranty application or whatever you want, call it, then you can build that using whatever technology set you want to use. And then you can link into we believe in event messaging, Yeah. So whenever there is a change in the system, it sends out a message saying now product owned, product change, customer change, new invoice created, any status change, anything is getting signaled. And then you take that information you need and you store that in your own data store, and then you can do whatever you want to do outside our ERP. We don't really care, right? So you can change whatever. And then you can say, well, now I need to update the ERP. Then you typically send it back with an update, and then the system will automatically update the master record or typically it's master data. You're not super fond of people messing around with transaction without the necessary guardrails around it. But then there's an API for that. So you can either change the system through the tooling available to enrich the object. The advantage of that approach is that everything becomes natural in your workflow, reporting, screens, everything it's there. You don't have to worry about it. Or you can build on the outside. If you build on the outside, then you link through the sort of messaging or the APIs. You can still use our authorization and authentication routines or services to make sure that you are a true user of the system. But then you can have it decoupled that way, and then you can build whatever you want. Make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. And thank you so much for describing that. So now let's take this conversation to slightly newer level. And that is going to be, I don't know if you're going to have any sort of examples or the stories that you are seeing in your space related to artificial intelligence, how customers are utilizing it. So obviously you have all of these problems in the ERP world. Everybody is trying to solve them differently. Some have solution for master data, some don't. So some of the use cases, and if you can talk about the challenges, okay? So maybe they tried to implement a use case, but then it did not work because the underlying data wasn't as great. Any stories by any chance?
So the AI topic or the machine learning topic and all that is a good topic. It's a great and interesting. I think that the reality is that nobody really completely understands what they're supposed to do with this thing, right? So one of the challenges is really to understand what is it you can use it for and what are the use cases. Where we see the most users is sort of you using it forecasting. You can use elements of machine learning in providing some better forecasting, whatever, cost forecasting, pipeline forecasting. Is it order of magnitude better than the old-fashioned statistical method? We all know probably not. But essentially, what one of the challenges, for example, by using where we see a lot of good traction is, of course, within OCR. When you scan invoices, you scan receipts, you scan all these things, right? That's where we see a lot of traction and makes a lot of sense because to a large extent, you can scan the receipts and it can sort of guess that's for your travel expense, right? Yeah. You can scan invoices and in 90-something, 95%, it will figure out where to go with this invoice, where it needs to, what project or what ledger needs to go into after it's scanned it. So that's where we're seeing challenges is to get sufficiently data to be precise enough in estimating, right? So we can use, if you talk receipts, you need receipts from everywhere you are in the world because receipts are slightly different. Yep. So it depends on what data elements on the receipt means what in what country. So in our case, we have had a lot of great data in where we are present, but if we have somebody outside our main areas, my main regions, it's really hard to get hands on the sufficient data set to train them. So that's where we are seeing the challenges. But we do see that customers using these technologies, service like receipt recognition, are super happy about them because they do really help. The same with invoice scanning and so forth. That's also an area where we see a lot of traction. Some of the things where we've been looking at is more how do you drive the internal processes better, so you can sort of move customers away from the ERP itself and then use machine learning to maybe scrutinize your data automatically, make sure that any live integration goes to the right places. But that's a confidence gap. Everybody talks about they want to use it, but they don't trust it. So there you go. So there's sort of we're in this. I think we need to get some years down the road, to be honest, before people are fully comfortable with this. Where have we seen it go wrong? Well, it goes wrong. It's sort of back to, sorry, I have to use that one again. This is the first to pop to mind. When we had to do this automated population of people to work on projects, that went awfully wrong because something in the data weren't correct. That was before we got to the second stage. Yeah. So it's better now, but that went awfully wrong. That didn't work at all because we didn't manage our data. We didn't know what the data was, right? So what else do we have that can go awfully wrong? Yeah, invoices can go awfully wrong if they're totally off the standard, and then you get all sort of results out of it. If you don't think through the data model in terms of electronic invoicing, or so for example here in Europe, if you engage with public institutions, it's all PayPal, but PayPal is not PayPal. PayPal is sort of, but not totally. And again, there it can go awfully wrong if you try to find out what's going on automatically in that data. I see that the next step of ERP is really where you move the business processes automatically, where we don't need people to go in and maintain data in the ERP, where we can use these technology to, in 99% cases, sort through to get the right data into the system, so we don't need to use humans there. And only, for example, if the system cannot figuring out what is the invoice number or something like that, and it comes out and asks you. And I believe that goal is getting very, very close to we can do that. The thing about all these things is that they still require a certain amount of data to get to a certain confidence level that you are actually making the right decisions automatically, right? That's where I see the direction going. But again, as I started saying, everybody talks about it. There's not a lot of traction in real life, to be honest, apart from these areas where it's obvious.
Yeah, no, completely agree. And I'm going to unpack a little bit there overall in terms of, the different use cases of AI that you mentioned. And one of the things one is decision science. I mean, that's how this conversation has started, that, data silos, you get the data, you sort of make the decision. That's number one. Then you are mentioning the other one, which is, in my mind, I like to define it as, and I don't know whether you understand the term, first mile, last mile in supply chain. So here it's almost like first mile of AI versus last mile of AI overall from the process perspective. And then you have something in between as well, right? So these three are very different use cases, and they all could have very different implications. Now, first mile of AI, I don't know how much data quality matters in that case, because you are literally reading the document. You are absolutely right that when you are going to have, let's say, different format of receipts, okay? So sometimes your AI algorithm might not work, but still your risk is not as high. But when you look at, much further, I don't know whether it is going to be upstream, downstream, probably upstream, in terms of the decision science, there your data quality is going to matter a lot, because you are making key business decisions. And I don't know if you're feeding back, are you using only for reporting? There could be many different things. But the craziest things that I see personally, okay, is going to be in that middle layer that you mentioned, right? And sometimes we have seen people hijacking this process, okay? And they are mentioning their, let's say, allocation or the resource allocation that you mentioned in your space. You are not going to have inventory allocation, but you are still going to have the, people allocation or the resource allocation, skill allocation. I don't know, how many different allocations you have. But sometimes they feel that, what? ERP, too complex. Don't use ERP. I'm going to take that out. And I'm going to use AI to solve these problems, okay? And that's where
it's not working,
right?
No, I think there's a lot of companies making a lot of money on things that they should probably not even start in the first place. That's my view on some of these topics, right? I think, I agree with you. I think I still believe in the last mile. If you talk about the last mile, where you see a P system being pervasive.
Yeah.
They're going to be there. They're going to be perceiving, sensing, understanding, and predicting based on data. We will get there, not as fast as we might have hoped for, but we are definitely moving in that direction, away from this invasive ERP software that's so much in your face. And to your point, this idea that you take sort of small bits and pieces out of the ERP, the problem is that when you try to, for example, when we talked about this resource allocation, and you can, I guess it's the same now. I'm not a supply chain guy, so maybe I'm totally overstating my knowledge here. But what typically happens if you try to abstract it out is that in order to make some sensible algorithmic decisions, in many cases you end up offloading all the data anyway. So it's a massive amount of data you need access to actually train your algorithms, right?
Yeah.
So for example, if you have resource skills, you need to know all the projects that's been run, all the people that has been running on the project. You have to know how much overrun there were on project. There's like a ton of things in the ERP that makes you decide whether it was a successful or not successful product. And then you need project, and then you need to determine, okay, why was there any overlap between people? Was it the combination? Was it the location? And you end up having to sort of have this huge weird thing you need to sort of pull out of the ERP to build outside, and you're not going to be successful. I don't think so. At least it's a little as slapping RPA on top of some legacy software and then say you automate it. It's sort of like weird to me. But anyway, that's my view.
Yeah, I could not agree more. So I think we are close to our time now. So, we can cover just two things. If there are any things that you wanted to cover, if you could not cover, I could not ask those questions. So offer that commentary and any closing advice that you might have for the listeners.
Yeah, I think what is, so one thing that's key, right, is that one thing we know is that the technology is never going to stop changing. There's always going to be new technologies. There's always going to be a different approach to implementing. So I think you should always be mindful about all these new hype things coming up, and then do some diligent work whether this makes sense or not. And then if you are in the process of acquiring new technology, I think you also need to make sure that you look at sort of not just what your needs are today, not what your needs was yesterday, but what are your needs tomorrow. And it's not just about the functional needs. They are so easy to deal with. I need a button, or I need a general ledger, or I need, yeah. But where's your business going to be in 3 years? What do you need to make sure that while you go through a transformation, and more companies, regardless of where they are, go through digital transformations driven by increased digitization, how do you make sure that the platform, and here I refer to ERP as a platform, that the ERP is actually capable of, by providing sufficient flexibility through the architecture, technologies, tools available, that you can keep molding it without ruining it to be on your journey for like 10, 15 years, right? So that's something to keep in mind when you go out there.
Yeah, could not agree more. And my personal takeaway from this conversation is going to be, I guess, know your data model, know your data set, know your architecture. On that note, I really want to thank you for your time. This has been a powerful episode, Claus. Thank you so much for it.
I appreciate it, Sam. Good being here. Thanks. Enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
I cannot thank our guests enough for coming on the show, for sharing their knowledge and journey. I always pick up learnings from our guests, and hopefully you learned something new today. If you want to learn more about Claus, head over to Unit 4's website at unit4.com. It's UNIT number 4.com to see what their next generation enterprise solutions can do for your people-centric mid-market organizations. Links and more information will also be available in the show notes. Also, don't forget to subscribe and spread the word among folks with similar backgrounds. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please review and rate us on your favorite podcasting platform or DM me on any social channels. I'll try my best to respond personally and make sure you get help. Thank you, and I hope to catch you on the next episode of the WBS Podcast.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.